lot of the stuff that happens here is just not normal.
You know, half of my graduating class is dead, and I'm 23 years old.
I love it because of the way it makes me feel and how it takes everything away, but I hate it because of what it's doing to me and what it's doing to the people around me.
I've done horrible things for dope.
I'm speaking to Sean Dunne, documentary filmmaker. I'm a huge fan of two of your films. I first watched Oxiana, followed by Florida Man. And what was different and, to be honest, kind of emotional as a huge documentary fan, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are obsessed with documentaries, there is this story arc to the average popular documentary. Starts with tension, relieves tension, gives you a bit more, relieves, then there's not necessarily a happy ending, but there's a conclusion where the viewer can put it in a box. The viewer can say, okay, this was a stressful hour, but now it's in a box and I'm moving on. I started watching Oxiana, and 15 minutes in, there was tension, 30 minutes, 45, an hour, and there wasn't a happy ending. There wasn't a clear conclusion that I wasn't able to put anything into a box. That was one of the most emotional documentaries I've watched in the past year. And after seeing that, I knew I had to speak to you. So maybe zooming all the way out, for someone who hasn't listened, and a warning to anyone who's thinking of watching the film, it is a serious film, and you shouldn't go into it thinking it's going to have some happy ending like a Netflix doc. Can you explain Oxiana to those who haven't seen it?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. This is a pleasure. I love being able to revisit these projects and think about them, even especially after some time's gone by. Because when we first make them, it's hard to wrap my head around what's even going on. But Oxiana is a film that we made in 2013 about the opioid epidemic. And we did it through the lens of this one town in West Virginia called Oceana, West Virginia. And it's a place that I was on a road trip with a country musician friend of mine, Johnny Fritz, and we just happened upon Oceana. And he had spent some time there when he was a kid ATVing. It's just like a beautiful place in the mountains in West Virginia, an old coal mining town, and it's like an hour from anything. And it's a very small town, 1,500 people, and it's an hour from anything. So we happened upon it, and there was a weird vibe from the second we got there. You just tell, like, the sun was going down. We were like hanging out at McDonald's, and it's just like, something's up here. I'm not really sure. And we spotted a juggalo, and I'm very familiar with the juggalos from my previous films. And so I started talking to this juggalo, and he said, man, the only thing going on in this town is dope. So much so that they don't even call it Oceana, they call it oxianna. And he shot up in front of us, and we knew we were in for a little bit of a ride. So we spent a few days there just talking to people, hanging out, trying to get a lay of the land. And the more people we talked to, the more this story just kept repeating, just suffering with addiction. That, basically the coal mining industry had employed this whole town, and the whole economy revolved around coal mining. And they just up and left these people a lot of times injured or sick, reliant on them. And when they leave, it's not like they offered the people anything. So this industry just leaves, and it leaves this huge void that was then filled by drugs. And when we were there, the drugs it was honestly just prescription drugs. It was just pharmaceuticals. We brought weed down there, and people were looking at it like, where did you get that? Like, whoa, look at this. Everything down there revolved around prescription drugs. So it was a risky thing to kind of go towards. I remember getting death threats before we even went there. People calling me up and being like, don't come here. Don't come here and start poking your head around in the drug situation. Because there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of it. And quite frankly, nobody wants to put an end to it, including Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who called me on my cell phone after we had won at Tribeca Film Festival. He called me up and he said, how do we make sure this film doesn't see the light of day? Wow. So that's their representatives. And this film was a cry for help. That's all it was. The subjects in it. We went there and we just wanted to talk to people who were dealing with addiction in one way, shape, or form. whether it's a family member, whether they lost somebody, whether they're struggling themselves, if they've gone through it themselves. And we honestly hit it from every angle, because everywhere we looked, somebody was dealing with it. You know, a guy living under a bridge, a teenage prostitute, you know, a juggalo who his father killed his brother, his mother, and himself over pills. So we just kept coming across these crazy stories, and it was kind of like, how do we tell this story in a way? Like, it didn't feel like any other documentary. Like you're saying, it didn't feel like something that belonged on Netflix or Amazon or whatever the popular platforms were at the time. It just didn't feel like it, because there was no resolution. There was, and I didn't even want to fucking overstep my boundaries as a filmmaker and start saying, here's what these people need, and here's an expert to explain, and here's a nice little bow we're going to put on at the end so you can compartmentalize this and write it off. Like, no, you shouldn't compartmentalize and write this off. These are our brothers and sisters. These are people that kept the lights on in this country for fucking generations, and we turned our back on them, and they're suffering, and they're a microcosm for this whole place. So let's zoom in and take a look at it so we can illuminate the problem and figure out what we can do about it. And it was controversial. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why a documentary where we just talked to people who were addicted would be controversial. It was controversial that we even called it an opioid epidemic. We were way ahead of the curve on that. People really got on my case about that. But we made this film, and we made it and put it together in an unrelenting way, because that's what this is. It's unrelenting, and it doesn't discriminate. And yeah, there's predators out there, and they're prey, and the people of this town were prey. And I showed them as that. I didn't show them as like bad, hardened criminal drug addicts. I showed them for the people that they are, you know, beyond all that. And we gave some context as how people end up in those situations. And some people get it, some people don't. But I couldn't sugarcoat this project. It wouldn't have been doing anyone any favors. And the reason that those people were able to be so generous and bear their really horrific stories on camera for me is because they needed me to amplify it as a cry for help, as a way of maybe to get some resources down there, to get someone to pay attention. And look, like I said, at the conclusion of it all, I have the highest ranking person in West Virginia, Senator Joe Manchin, calling my cell phone and saying, let's make sure this doesn't see the light of day. So, I mean, that's kind of the system we're caught in. And this is honestly why I ended up putting the film out for free on YouTube. We had all kinds of offers for distribution for this or that, and they were all bullshit. They all would bring, it would narrow the audience. And this film was for all of our films were for everyone. I think art should be for free. So we put it out on the internet, and it's just kind of lived its life on there, and now gained pretty wide notoriety as like being there at the beginning of just the explosion of the opioid epidemic, and bringing back a remnant from it that's not tainted with just bullshit, you know.
Was my experience with this no resolution kind of shock? And it was shock. I mean, I've probably seen 150, 200 documentaries in my life, and I don't know if I've ever had one that kept being hopeless and hopeless and hopeless. Was that intentional? Is this something you hear a lot, why it affected people at scale? And I remember there was even a moment where you were talking to one of the pill drug dealers, and I had like a 30-second moment where I said, okay, well, this is the villain. This is the guy that's making all the money. And then like 2 minutes later, we realized he was just selling the drugs because he was addicted to the drugs. His whole family was dead. There was literally no villain. This was all just hopeless story after hopeless story. And do you hear that a lot? Was that intentional, or that was just the honest story and the situation?
It frustrates people because we've become so indoctrinated by the way formulaic documentaries are made, and the way we're educated and everything. Like you're set up for certain expectations. I, as an artist, live to defy those expectations. So when we were approaching it, it was even making it. I would pull up to an interview with a guy like that, like, okay, yeah, here's clearly a guy that's going to read more as a villain in this movie. And then you interview him, and you hang out, you get enough context, you hold enough space in without judgment, just really listen to somebody, really listen to them. And I would have a hard time making anyone a villain. There's a reason I didn't go towards cops in this movie, is because I fucking hate cops, and they're fucking full of shit. And I didn't want them to become some symbol of like, oh, that's what it is. That's the problem. We did some interviews with, a pill mill down there. This father and son team opened up a pain clinic, and they're dressed in black scrubs. They look like James Bond villains. And we interviewed them in one of the darkest, creepiest interviews I've ever done. And I couldn't put it in the movie because it too symbolized that villain role. Like, it's distracting. I really wanted this to be like a heart expanding experience. And the way I could do that was in the edit, play around a little bit with like, oh, this might be a bad guy, but hang around another 10 minutes and you're going to see the rest of this story, and question the person that judged him 15 minutes ago. So I feel like a lot of our films, that's what the practice is like setting someone up for like, oh, I'm going to fucking laugh my ass off at a bunch of juggalos right now. And by the end of it, you're like, I am a juggalo. What the hell? So, that was like really the craft that we were working in the edit, was like, how do we defy expectations? How do we make people love and respect and have compassion for these people without watering down their stories, without bringing on experts, without belittling them in any way. So, it was very much intentional, all of that stuff. That's why the edit took so long to really strike that chord in the right way. It took a while in the edit.
The film was a roller coaster, and it was almost like a mirror to yourself. Why am I judging this person in the first 2 minutes when I haven't heard the 12-minute context? And it was relentless. There would be a moment, oh, this is the drug dealer, he's the villain. Oh, this person gave away their child. Then 4 minutes later, your heart breaks for the person. You have empathy. You realize they are just like me, and I could have been in that situation if a couple things went wrong. And there's a beauty in a film where you put a mirror in front of the person that says, hey, remember how you harshly judged this person 45 seconds ago? And now you know the reality. And I'm not saying this is flattering, and I'm not trying to over exaggerate, but it was an incredibly impactful, raw film, and it meant a lot to me. And not in the sense of I have a better understanding of how to fix things, or I have a better understanding of this problem, just as hey, this is a problem. Humans are humans. Do not look down on these people. We are all going through it in different ways. This is a very unique situation, but it happens across the country and world. And one question that I had, and I don't know if it's your personality or your team having a certain warmth, but you were interviewing these people and they let all their guards down. Were you doing like 4-hour interviews to get 2 minutes? Or what did it take? Because every person told you the most painful moments, raw. Is it your personality being warm and not being judgmental? Or was that just the nature of these people because they've been through so much, their egos aren't what they could be?
Yeah, that's true. There's a bit of that. I mean, it's so desperate that it's like, oh, I have my chance. There's a camera. There's 2 cameras here. There's people that'll listen. And I'm a really good listener. So, these weren't 4-hour interviews. These were 15-minute interviews, and the whole thing would make it into the movie. Like that guy, that drug dealer guy whose family was killed and everything. We used pretty much every scrap of what he gave us. We hung out with him for 20 minutes, half hour. And, I think that people, to your point about being mirrors, we're all mirrors. So, I come in there, and all I'm doing on any film is trying to be myself the most. Like, I'm not ever holding a camera. I don't have questions in front of me. I don't have a pen. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm smoking pot and hanging out and just bonding with people. And that's what I do with pretty much all of the subjects. It's just like, I'll smoke a joint, hang out. They'll kind of see I'm a loose guy. I'll be vulnerable myself. I'll talk about why I'm there. What happened with my dad. And, it's usually, it's pretty funny because like as my career's gone on, I've done interviews less, and I just have facilitate conversations more. And if anything's getting cut out, it's my end of the conversation. So, they're not interviews because I feel like interviews is like you're trying to pull something out of somebody, and you have a goal and you have to get it from them. And whereas a conversation is just like an exchange. And it creates a way different vibe in the film. Like, I can tell when I watch any kind of Netflix documentary, I'm like, yeah, there was a team of producers sitting just off camera, and they all had questions, and they were making you repeat things and getting this bizarre angle and just doing everything to compensate for their lack of fucking understanding how humanity works. And yeah, the crew was big on that film, because I was at the beginning of my career and maybe a little more self-conscious about coverage and everything. So we had a big team, but what I try to do is just have the subject focus on me. If I just give them one point of focus, I can usually get something deep out of them. Quite frankly, because I'm willing to be deep, and they can read the situation. If I was shallow enough to stand there with a piece of paper and be like, tell me the first time that you tried pills, I'm going to get back that level of shallowness. So that's kind of the game of flirtation I just play with the universe at any given time. And I feel like I've gotten the best out of people in that way. And I feel like I get something out of people that a lot of people wouldn't even dare to go towards. If, like, some of these interviews feel like a page out of someone's diary, like that no one should fucking know about. But they're like, I need you to know about this. I need you to know what happened to my family, because only this town knows. And it's going on left and right, and these stories are happening every week, and the newspapers won't even report it as what it is. The newspapers won't say that someone died of an overdose, or won't say that somebody killed their family for pills. They try to sugarcoat things and keep people in the dark, and it all just perpetuates this stuff. So I was just there for, like, the breath of truth. Let's just present the truth. I know it's not going to be pretty. I know there's not going to be a Hollywood ending, but to me there was. The last shot of that film just hangs on a newborn baby that was in this world for maybe 2 hours when we went in there. This brand new child that was born to a couple that was struggling with addiction. But I just hung on it because it was such a beautiful, just the most beautiful baby I've ever seen, glowing, just psyched, just a little, and the baby cracks a little smile, and we go to the credits. So the film starts with a guy holding up a coat hanger with a Juggalo shirt saying, "This is my dead brother's shirt, and I still keep it because it smells like him." So you're like looking at the ghost of somebody, like an empty shirt, like just symbolic. The film, that's the first thing in the movie. And then the last thing in the movie is a new life, new hope, a new chance. There is hope here. We can have faith in each other. We can have faith in the new generation. We can transcend these things. So there's a lot going on in the film. There's a whole nother film visually going on. The things that people are saying are very shocking and distracting, but then there's just like this whole other vibe going on that really pulls you into what it feels like to be in the throes of addiction, or living in this town that's in the throes of addiction. The soundtrack was very important to that. The way we shot our B-roll was very important to that. The way we split it up into acts, and it doesn't build tension, but it's building something in you. It's pulling something out of you, where if you're halfway through that movie and you're not feeling empathy for these people, you got to check yourself at that point. Watch the rest of it. You'll get there. So it was very intentional in that way.
Even the landscape of that B-roll, where this town is situated in these like big trees and this dark grain, like that city also felt. The B-roll was such a big part of splitting up the scenes. It was beautifully done. I was curious about how, or if you balance, you're a filmmaker, you're there to make a film. And I interviewed on this podcast a filmmaker who was doing a documentary, and he ended up meeting his dad after 25 years. And he talked about how conflicted he was about the scene, because 50% of his brain was, wow, I just met my father for the first time in over 2 decades. But the other 50% was, I have a film to shoot. I got to make sure the angles are right. I got to make sure we get certain moments. And even sometimes I'm guilty in this podcast where I'm really just trying to have an honest conversation with someone, but my mind automatically goes to, that might be a good clip for YouTube, or I need to focus on the next question because there are listeners and I want to make sure the listeners get a good flow. What level of balancing your presence, being present with these interviews, and your responsibility to get a big film, is that something that's a skill? Or you're just there to be present, and what you get, you get?
Well, the skill is being present, and that's that's what that's where this conversation starts to swing in, like, to spiritual realms of like who I am and figuring out who I am and what I'm there to do. And my whole spirituality is such a weird word, it's such a charged word, but my spiritual practice is about tuning myself to be more present. And my life is a reflection of what you see in this film. Like, all my friendships are as deep as you could take them, and very vulnerability is the name of the game. So I try to be vulnerable and present. And when we get to make these films, I mean, I think this is where like the 10,000 hour thing comes in. It's like you work that muscle so much that I show up. I trust my crew. I've done all the filmmaking stuff before we even get there, because I don't want to have to deal with like, okay, Hillary, here's how we want to shoot this, and just, you do your thing, I'm going to do mine. You're going to capture this, right? We went over how this film, what this looks like and everything. We already buttoned all that stuff up. Just do your job, I'll do mine. And so there's a lot of trust in the whole team in that way, but just trusting yourself and just trusting that if you're present, you're going to get the best out of people. And it sounds simple, but it's a process. It's going to be a lifelong process for me. And I think I can take things even deeper as these films continue and as my practices continue. So yeah, for me, it's like the filmmaking part of it is me being present. Because when I'm present, it's all very obvious. It's very split-second decisions that are second nature. They're really easy to make, those decisions, because I've made films so many. I've practiced a lot in less consequential situations than that, but I have practiced a lot. And not to say I don't blow it. Not to say there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't hit the edit room floor that like, I got the subject too high. Like, we were just vibing too much. He got too high and he got on camera and he just couldn't do it. So that type of stuff happens too. But you learn.
There are so many moments that affected me emotionally, but just for you being there in person, a foot away from these people, was there a moment that stood out that really shook you out? A specific sad, emotional moment where you were like, oh, this kind of fucked up my day, this conversation?
I mean, there was things that not fucked up my day, fucked up my life, that story of that guy, coming home, discovering his dad killed himself, and there's pills all over the place in blood. And then he goes and he finds that his dad killed his mom and his brother. So his whole family is dead. He discovers this situation. Before he does anything, he gets those pills together. He makes sure he's got his own fix. Like, it's haunting. It's just haunting. To the point where when we were editing those scenes, like, that was what we would do that day. It was like, we're going to work on his stuff, because it's just like, you got to be mentally prepared to keep looking at that footage over and over again and hearing the story over and over again. And it was just haunting. And the other one that stands out for me is that there's a shot in there of like a little girl, like she's like on like a little, like holding like a little chicken wire fence, and she has no clothes on and she's like a little dirty. And that little girl really broke our heart. Her parents were struggling so much, and there was a lot of abuse going on, and we were just front row center to it, not blaming the parents, just kind of seeing like, this is what this environment leads to. This is what, a lack of anyone giving a fuck about these people leads to. It's not their fault, So that little girl ended up in foster care. I don't know where she is now, but I think about her all the time. Like, she's probably 10 years old now. And just thinking about what her life must have been, because we did an interview with her parents and then left, and then the next day we come across her mom, and she looks she's disfigured. Her husband beat the fucking shit out of her after we were over there, and she's just sitting there completely disfigured. Someone attacked him and stabbed him and left him for dead in a ditch, and he ended up in the hospital. It was just like dysfunction on another level that I thought I had seen some next level dysfunction, but when there's a little girl involved, it was just like confusing. It's like, where do we step in? What's our role here? What can we do? And what sucks is there's really not much you can do. So you'll learn a lot from that too, is to not be attached to outcomes, and that has to do with presence. When you're present and in the moment, you're not forming attachments. You're with a person, and you can almost feel their divinity despite all of the static and the noise and the addiction and the abuse. You can feel their divinity, and that's the only thing that gets me through it.
I rewatched Oxiana last night, so I've seen it now twice fully, and I could feel my ego or my defense mechanism trigger, and I caught myself saying the best way I could sleep tonight with peace is by saying this is Oceana. This is this bizarre little town, and they have an issue, and it's a complete outlier, and this is not happening in the middle of America. It's not. I'm Canadian. It's not happening in Canada. And I kind of caught myself trying to put this into a box of just an obscure little town. But it's probably pretty clear that this is a microcosm of what's happening in North America in many small cities. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that was part of the controversy of this film. Is like we said, this is a microcosm for what's going on all over the country. This is just a small example, and I feel like there's Oceanas and oxiannas in every city, town, and state in this country, and some element of that. And that's what we heard once we put it out. And this is why I'm glad we put it out for free. Just it's on YouTube, is because I still get comments. They flood in every day. This feels exactly like my hometown in California. This feels exactly like my hometown in Canada, in Australia, all over obscure parts of the world that you would not think are struggling with this, but they are, because we live in a capitalist society, and this is what it does to people. It's not right. It's not right. The exploitation of labor, the being used as pawns and subjugated by corporations. It's not where it's at, and it's creating a huge sense of isolation and despair in people. And this is what's going to happen. This just blew out to a whole town. But I think since we've put out this film, I think that this whole country has become Oxiana. Like it really has. Wow. And it's sad. It's sad, and there are solutions. I didn't feel like at the time it was my place or our place to say, here's what the solution is, because we just want to listen. We want to hear. We want to put this out there and feel back from the viewers what this means. And so that's why we leave it a little open-ended. That's why we don't point fingers or say, here's the obvious solution, or here's the obvious culprit in all this. Because it's hard. It's on many levels, but it definitely reaches to the highest levels. Like I said, Joe Manchin calling me, and a senator calling my cell phone to say, don't put this out, as opposed to saying, how can we help? He's saying, let's ignore it. And then you find out his daughter is the CEO of a big pharmaceutical company, and that's who he's there representing. He's not representing the people, and they keep electing him. It's definitely a microcosm of what's going on in this country, and I think sadly the whole world.
I feel like the answer might be obvious just knowing your vibe and personality in the past 20 minutes, but this is a question that I've asked a lot of guests, and I've been thinking about a lot in my life. This idea that I've been interested in philosophy and psychology since I was in high school, and one why leads to the next why, which leads to the next why. And I've been starting to stumble across this thought, is ignorance bliss? Would I have been happier if I never clicked Oxiana on YouTube? And would you potentially, because of the immense pain and trauma you've seen filming these, do you ever have those thoughts where you say, hey, I might have been a little bit more at peace and I could sleep a little easier at night if I didn't see these people face to face? Is there any truth to ignorance is bliss?
I mean, for some people, I think. For me, I'm not like that. I like to deal with my problems. I mean, like I take ayahuasca all the time, and that's a one-way ticket. That's some sacred jungle medicine. It's a one-way ticket to the shadow realm. And you get into the shadow realm and you start to meet some demons. They're your demons that you've created. And that's the way to deal with them, is to go into the shadow realm and say, oh, these demons aren't demons. They're my friends. I got to fucking deal with this stuff. I can't disappear my problems and banish them to my subconscious. They're going to bubble up in some way, shape, or form. So I might as well deal with it. So that's part of my practice, is like seeing the truth, not just the sugar-coated version of things that makes me feel more comfortable. I actually feel more comfortable when I'm more aware, when I've expanded my consciousness, not when I've shrunk it, And I think a lot of people are a lot more comfortable in a shrunken form of consciousness, not knowing about this stuff, not being aware of it. And it helps them go and carry on with their life. I get that. I totally get that. They want to go to brunch. They want to enjoy themselves. They don't want to have to sit with these things because it's tough. And it feels like no one individual can do anything about it. So I think that's why we have the temptation to compartmentalize or ignore, is because we just feel hopeless in it. But this film and all the films we make, I think, are meant to be a reminder that you can do something about it. And it's as simple as just changing your mind. And if everyone did that and we stopped otherizing each other so much, we could have the compassion that would lead to the real solutions that could solve a lot of these problems. So that's why we go towards fringe communities and fringy people, and the people that we demonize and otherize in this country. We go towards them to show them, like, nah, they are us. They're us. You don't want to ignore that. So you get to know some juggalos, and you realize you're a juggalo. To me, that's expanded consciousness. That's beautiful. That's like, I'm more than what I once thought I was, and I can handle this. And the best way to handle it is by not judging and learning how to listen. And making all these films has expanded my heart, and it's expanded my consciousness and expanded my circle of compassion, and that's made me a better person. And I would rather be in that position than not aware. That's just my personal.
That was very, very beautifully put. Wrapping up on Oxiana, and I'm glad you brought up the humanizing people, because my greatest takeaway from that film, as I'm being very open and honest, that it was a very painful film for me to watch. I felt very helpless, like I didn't have an answer. I felt very concerned that this is happening in every city across North America, potentially globally. So while I was conflicted throughout the entire film, I did benefit based on humanizing people that the general public has discarded. So the humanizing of that film, to me, was the greatest benefit. Well, I'm thankful that you shot it. But wrapping up on Oxiana, what is your proudest moment with that film, whether it's an award or whether it's a message or some change that film brought that you're the most proud of?
I think I'm probably just most proud of that there's an awareness about this now on a bigger level. I'm proud that we were at the crest of that wave of understanding and trying to humanize and not otherize. I'm proud that, like, we had the integrity. For me, it was a young age. I was 30 when I made that, to kind of hold our ground and make the film that those people deserved, and not the one that Netflix wanted. So that's as a filmmaker, that's what I'm most proud of, and the fact that we shed some light on something that actually did make a difference and got some help down there. And I know some people that had left the area saw the film and started sending resources back, like not realizing how bad it had gotten. So I'm really proud of that. And I'm proud of that film in a lot of ways. And our whole team, our editor, Kathy Gatto, just absolutely killed it. The cinematographer, Hilary Spira, my girlfriend, the producer, Cass Greener, just everybody just showed up in a way that made us all better people. And I think we all carry that place in our heart. And I notice it when I go to other places. And I know that's how it's made me a better person, is because I can see reflections of that place and those problems other places, and not quickly rush to judgment.
Well, it's funny. I was going to say let's pivot into a funner, lighthearted film, Florida Man, which is where I'd like to take it. But
cool.
Maybe I'm just an outlier, or I'm just like a weirdo. But there's two ways to watch Florida Man. One, it's comedic and it's fun and it's these characters. But there is some tragedy in there. I feel like all your films are so open and vulnerable, where as much as I was hysterically laughing at some of these characters, I also would get sad at some other moments. So for those who haven't watched it, and this one's a little more lighthearted, so I'll recommend to my viewers, if you want something that's a little bit not quite as tragic, Florida Man, incredible film. Can you explain that one briefly for those who haven't seen it?
Yeah, Florida Man, we made in 2015, and we were making another film at the time called Cam Girls about online sex workers, and that was a big feature film that was kind of sprawling. It was taking us like 6 months to make it, which was a long time for us, especially self-financing it. And we were making Cam Girls in a way that was like more locked off and beautiful, and trying to elevate the subject matter because they're so shit on by people that we needed to really bring it up a notch. So we were making it in a certain way, and that we wanted to kind of make something that was the contrast to that, something that's just like, we just have one lens and one camera, and we don't even have a tripod, and yeah, the sound guy's probably going to be in half the shots, and like just loose. Like we really were wanting to make something like that. And I had this idea for the film Florida Man rattling around in my head, where I just wanted to go, because I've lived in Florida before, and I used to do this. I used to just go talk to people that were drifting around, and so I had an eye for the Florida Man from having lived there, like what they're like, where they dwell, kind of what makes them funny, what makes them tragic, all this stuff. So I had the whole movie in my head, but it just was never time to make it. And while we were making Cam Girls, me and Cass Greener, my partner and producer, we took some mushrooms with our cinematographer, Isaac Bauman. And during that mushroom trip, it just like became very clear, like, let's go make Florida Man. And I told them about the project, and they were like, yes, let's do it. So Cass just booked us 10 days down in Florida, 2 days in 5 different cities. We would just get an Airbnb and just spider off of that every night. And we'd go out from like 6 to 10 at night and film a little bit. Then we'd go out like 12 to 3 in the morning and film a little bit, and just kind of hang out and just bond during the day, and just knowing that's not the best time to go out there. But then when we'd go out there, we would just go to a 7-Eleven and get out of the car, take out the boom mic, and people would come over to us, and we would talk to them for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe less sometimes. Sometimes we wouldn't even talk to them. We'd just say, can we get your portrait for this film, Florida Man? And since we just had one lens, we just had the 16 millimeter lens, we'd have to really get up in people's faces, and it created a whole dynamic. Like the camera is kind of a character in that movie. And, from the first second that we were like, all right, cool, it's on, we're out, we're here, we're out on the outskirts of Orlando, we're making this film. We just got out of the car, and the first guy we met is the first guy in the movie. Like, it was just like that. It's very magical. We didn't have to go out of our way to do anything. We would just show up in parking lots and kind of walk around a little bit, or let people come to us. And didn't really even ask any questions. It was one of those, it was like kind of like just trying experimental stuff. Like, because Cam Girls, like I had a lot of questions for the girls, and I was doing off-camera interviews so I could get their real voices. And so that film is like, it's kind of like there's like a podcast layered in, and then there's the visual element. So it was like a little more tedious. There was the interviews for Cam Girls were a lot. They were like an hour, and I just wanted to do something where I didn't even ask any questions. So we would just literally take out the camera, and someone would just start saying whatever they wanted. And I just, probably after talking to 4 or 5 people, I realized, I was like, this is going to be our movie. It's going to fucking be real rough and tumble, really loose, and it's going to capture the spirit of these guys. So yeah, we just spent those 10 days drifting around, smoking pot, hanging out, and talking to some weirdos, and just the whole spectrum of feelings and emotions and things going on. And some people would hit us with the most loving, crazy, profound thing I've ever heard from a homeless guy sitting outside of a Waffle House, or a dude that we saw riding his bike down the street with these big handlebars, and we just started filming him. And then, he pulled into a thing, and we're like, hey, what do you have to say? And he's like, I just wish everyone would love each other. Like, just real deep, good shit. And then, you come across a motherfucker who is like, I live to fight. That's all I do. I go to bars and I try to fight people. And I'll fight you right now, as a matter of fact. So it was so fun to get to make a project that, like, really anything went. I wasn't even trying to necessarily like be like, this is the vibe, and everyone that makes it into this film needs to fit this vibe. It's just like pretty much everyone that we talked to qualified, because they were Florida men, and they carried that spirit, which is a really wild kind of drifter energy, on the fringes, like we love, somebody who's been criminalized for just living a lot of the time, So there's a lot of stories in there about the police state and oppression in that way. There's a lot of stories of drug abuse. There's a lot of stories about conspiracies and just the whole range of what you'd expect. But we put it together in like a fun way that felt like what listening to like a great album would feel like, just like, whoa, like, oh, this song built off that one and that one built on it, and then it just built to this. And we were just having a lot of fun with that one. And it's probably one of my favorite things we've done. It's like, it really hits for me even still 6 years later.
It's very interesting how both of your films, the style of them, how unique they are, caused me to, in both cases, to make a judgment and then realize that I made an error. Whether Oxiana, I would judge the drug dealer, I would judge the single mother, and then immediately after, I'd say, I wish I could help these people. And on a technical term, because I've been involved in some music videos and a lot of production, I am very guilty, and I need to give a huge shout out to your camera operator, because in the first 5 minutes, the camera work was so in his face, in everyone's face. It was such a character that I was almost a little off put my first 5 minutes because I've never seen a film like that. By the end of Florida Man, I was like, this is brilliant. This camera operator is a part of this film. And I made that 5 minute judgment, and by the end, that person deserves a lot of credit, or that decision you guys made, because the camera was truly a character in the film.
Yeah, it was us. It was an extension off of us, and that's why there's lens changes in there. There's like you see the boom mic, you see the crew, you really kind of like feel the environment, and you feel the adventure we were on. And I have to hand it to Isaac for being that bold with it, because we made a bold decision by only bringing one lens down there, and just to stick with it in a way that, like, he wasn't hesitant to get up in these guys' faces that we knew for 3 seconds. So and it like, talk about tension. There was like a natural tension, like, where sometimes you felt like they were going to be like just all of a sudden punch you or something like that. And we definitely had those situations, but I got to hand it to Isaac. And it's funny because we hear that comment from a lot of filmmakers, where they held that judgment that you transcended by the end, where they're just like, fuck this, I can't believe you did that. Here's the proper way to do it. Like, you don't know fucking shit. Like, what are you talking about? Like this is how we chose to do it. This is how we chose to capture this. I think it was the best way to capture it, because I think it was a reflection of what it feels like to drift around Florida in a haze of pot smoke and just start making friends. Like, that's what it feels like. It's loose. It's not locked off. There's not perfect B-roll shots. As a matter of fact, there's no B-roll shots. So I loved the idea of stripping away all these things that other people rely on and taking out that, the thing that kills me the most about documentaries now is the preciousness, just the preciousness of everything. Did they hit everything perfect? Did that look perfect? Did we get this push right? Oh, shoot it again if we didn't get it right. Get them to say that again. It's like, nah, that ain't real life. That's you fucking jagging off as a filmmaker. But and I sense that in the first fucking 5 minutes of anything, and that's usually the true test of whether I can even get through someone else's film is like, does it pass the bullshit test, like, in the first 5 minutes? And we tend to push people into the deep end, and if you're not grooving with it in the first 5 minutes, it's like and you stick with it, you probably will be by the end, like you just said.
With Oxiana, you said, nope, we're not going to give you a fake story. We're not going to give you the conclusion. You're going to be uncomfortable from minute 1 to minute 60. Yeah. And with the camera work in Florida Man, it was just so unexpected, because I've never seen a film so personal, so many close-up shots where it's almost like, whoa, this person's too close to me right now. But of course, towards the end, you realize that's a part of this story. I wonder, since we're talking Oxiana and Florida Man, I wonder what it says about me, or if you have an opinion on this, that I looked at Florida Man as lighthearted, and I looked at these characters, while I did think there was sadness and tragedy, they were incredibly interesting, and it felt like they still had hope in some way, versus Oxiana, where I didn't feel 1 ounce of hope the entire film. These stories broke my heart, but both of these people are living in tremendous poverty or homeless. Both are drug addicted or alcoholics. what caused my reaction to Florida Man to be almost hopeful and silly and lighthearted and interested in these crazy people versus literally just being sad for essentially the same people in many ways? Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I mean, I think that has to do with like the spirit of Florida a little bit. There's like there's not like one form of oppression going on there. There's many factors. Whereas like with Oxiana, it's pretty clear. It's like the greed of the pharmaceuticals and the greed of big coal like really left these people in a fucking tremendously tough position to get out of, and no one can hear them and no one cares about them. Whereas like the Florida Man is like they already have a place in culture. Like when you say oh, that's a Florida Man, like you immediately kind of have this thing, and it's just like this wild man. They're kind of funny, and we just essentialize that. But I think like to your point, it has a lot to do with the people of Oceana, there's a hopelessness that it's not that funny. But like with the guys in Florida, there's a hopelessness that they make fun of themselves and that they embrace, and it's almost what drives them. It's almost what leads them on these wild adventures that you hear pop up in headlines all the time. Florida Man throws a live alligator through a Wendy's drive-through window while he was high on meth. Like, you know, like it's funny. I don't know. It's just wild and it's funny. And to me, it's not like the direct result of like any one system of oppression. It's just the fucking weird big system of oppression that we live under, and the police state down there. And they have a sense of humor about it. There's like a looseness and a sense of humor. They don't feel like caged animals like they did in Oceana. It just the proximity of Oceana it's isolated. It's in the mountains. It's just like in the valley of these mountains, and to get in and out of there, it's an hour of driving windy ass mountain roads, and it's just like we tried to depict that, so you really do feel like you're just in this pocket of despair. Whereas like Florida, it's like everyone's kind of all over the place, and they're in this weird parking lot over here, or like blending in under the boardwalk on the beach or whatever. So they don't feel as caged or necessarily directly oppressed by this one entity, which is like coal or big pharma. So I don't know. There's a lot going on there. Yeah.
That's interesting, because I was thinking about that. It on a fundamental level, these people should create the same emotion in me, but they were literally polar opposites. Like, though there were some like homeless guys that you interviewed living on the beach, and they were loving it. They're talking about going surfing. These guys, like, there were some people that I don't know if it was fake or if they were under the influence, but they seemed genuinely like enjoying their very seemingly tragic, addicted, homeless life. It was very, very bizarre, but maybe it's culturally, and there are many reasons. Maybe the weather helps and other things.
Absolutely. The weather's a big factor, because you can kind of live like a happy homeless life down there. That kid under the Waffle House sign that's reading out of the Bible, like, just a beautiful soul. You know, he told me, it's not in the movie, but he was like, I lived in Ohio and I burned all my possessions, including my IDs, and got on a bus for cash and moved here, and I have nothing. I just walk around with this Bible, and I live on the beach across the street, and he finds enough food and people are generous enough that he's able to take care of himself. And he seems very far out, but he's one of the people in all of my films that I've related with the most. He was my age, and he just made a big decision about how he wanted to live his life. And I don't know, there's something kind of dignified about that. There's something kind of dignified about the way that these Florida men live. As silly and as wild as it seems, it kind of reminds me of the Juggalos in a way. Like, they've chosen this, whereas like the people in Oceana didn't choose this. This got thrust on them in a lot of ways. You know, a lot of the guys in Florida that we talk to, they're from other places. They came there running from the law in New York or New Jersey or Alabama or, you know, some other weird state, and they ended up down there, and this state is just more suited for them because the weather's nice and they can be wild and they can be drunk on the beach, and they're not going to get fucked with that much. So It's also the approach of like I was saying, the questioning as opposed to not really having any questioning. Like when we were making Oceana, like the people knew we were there to talk to them about their darkest moments of addiction. Whereas Florida Man, I'm just like, hey, we're here, and people want to present like their funniest story or whatever. They know we're only going to talk to them for 5 minutes, so they're just trying to say their most funny, wild thing, and or deep and profound thing. So that's kind of what I love so much about that film is like you could watch it through as a comedy and probably laugh more than most comedies, or you could watch it through as a tragedy and like really see the faults in our system and how many people we let through like fall through the cracks and where they end up and how wild it ends up being and how desperate it becomes. So there's lots of ways to watch that movie, you know, and I like to challenge the audience like that where you could be halfway through and you're like, I don't know how to qualify this or classify this necessarily. This is just its own thing. And as a filmmaker, like that's what I'm most proud of about that. It's just like feels like its own thing. And since then, so many people have sent me like their version, and I'm so psyched about that. Like, hey, I did this in my town, or I tried to, you know, do a Florida Man type of style in Australia, or this or that, and it's so flattering. It's so cool, and I hear from like cinematographers mostly, because I meet a lot of cinematographers, and they're like, you have no idea how influential that movie is. Like people use it as secondhand of like, let's just Florida Man this one, you know, like meaning handheld one lens, raw dog it, you know, and like that's become a thing in the industry, and we've become a little influential. Is like that's super flattering for sure. So.
Considering the raw and unique nature of these films we've been talking about, I know from the YouTube comments I've seen, even people on my team being excited that I'm speaking to you, that in many ways, the public, the people's champ, they are championing these independent films. But I'm just curious, when these films come out, what does the mainstream media think of them? What are the reviews from the big houses? Because while these films are people's champs, do you end up getting some pushback or uncomfortable reviews from the big guys that aren't familiar with this shock value?
Yeah, probably. You know, it's weird at this point, like the compliments and the criticisms kind of go down the same pipe and just like they just flow through me and it's like, whatever. But I mean, when Oxiana came out, there was hit pieces written about me, like the worst shit, just like really questioning my character to the core, you know, not assuming that I could have been coming from the right place in any way and just grasping for straws as to how to take us down. And there was just a couple brutal assessments of my character and that film when it came out. And I think that I've just always let it speak for itself, and it stood the test of time. And a lot of the films that were even at Tribeca Film Festival with us that year, you've never even heard of them. They never went anywhere. They never did anything. They signed some distribution deal and ended up on some obscure platform, and no one's seen it. It's just another piece of content. And I really thought that was such a powerful film that I didn't even bite back at anybody. If you wanted to write this off or write me off, whatever, I'm going to keep making films. I'm going to prove it to you. So yeah, sometimes these come out and they're not accepted or known, but like you're saying, the people get it. The people always get it. They get what we're doing. They appreciate that we took a different approach. They appreciate that we made it for them and not for the suits, because if we made it for the suits, these wouldn't feel anything like this. So that's why we've kind of taken on the artist struggle of having to fund our own projects, because that's been the main reaction from the mainstream is like we put something out and immediately it's like Vice wants to talk to us, A&E wants to talk to us, the Discovery Channel wants to talk to us, Netflix wants a meeting. And I always had to say the same thing to him. I was like, you wouldn't have funded this project that you're so excited to talk to me about. You would, if I pitched this to you, you would have denied it. You're psyched because it has 1 million views and it's been on the front page of Reddit all week. And now you get it because you see people get it. But if I showed this to you and said, well, you put this on your platform, you wouldn't have done it. If I pitched it to you, you wouldn't have funded it. So, you know, that's been the main reaction is like a lot of me just going in and telling Vice, like, fuck you. You guys produce content. We're trying to make art. Whether we succeed or not all the time is a different question, but like we have way different priorities, and you're trying to fucking corporatize this very sacred thing that I think we're doing. And so I don't take kindly to it because they don't support us to begin with. So I'm not flattered by them being like, oh, we get it now. No, you don't get it. You see how many views this got, and it's blowing away your fucking ratings on your dumbass fucking TV show that no one watches, and you want a bit of that. That's it. It really has nothing to do with the art I'm trying to make or the message that's here. You just see a lot of people watched it. So what means more to me is the comments, is putting it on YouTube and people chiming in and being like, yo, I watched this movie 6 years ago when I was in the throes of addiction, and now I'm 2 years clean and I'm watching it again through different eyes. And I just want to say I appreciate you humanizing these people. I appreciate you not shaming them. And that's the stuff that means more to me than any kind of mainstream criticism or adulation. It's just like, because it's all bullshit. They're not there for us. And I would say that to any young filmmaker, is like, don't assume they're there for you. Help is not on the way. It's very liberating to just say, I'm going to do this on my own. I would much rather have a small Patreon following that is loyal and really gets me, and they're funding my work, than like reaching out to Netflix every time I have an idea and asking permission to make my thing. It's like, and them trying to figure out through some algorithmic fucking crazy computation, like who's going to care or how I should make it, or would you make an adjustment to the second act? Like, fuck all this. No, like me and my editor and my girlfriend Cass are the last people that watch these and approve them. We output them and put them on the internet the day they're done. It's not like, hold on, maybe Sundance would be interested in this. Maybe so-and-so. We got into Tribeca because they reached out to us and said, we'd love to premiere your movie. And I said, that would be really, that would help spread the word about this. So we'll do it. But I haven't submitted to a film festival or anything like that. I'm not looking for any of that stuff. It's about the process.
Let's wrap up on that note. I'm sure you get messages all the time from young filmmakers asking for advice. I get it all the time, whether it's for music or a podcast. And my theory is I don't necessarily like to give tactical advice because everybody has a unique path, but I do have philosophical advice I give on patience and staying true to yourself. So I won't ask you for tactical advice for the young filmmaker, but what is your best piece of philosophical advice, spiritual advice for someone to become not even just a great filmmaker, but a meaningful filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, people ask me this all the time, and I think that they want tactical advice, and what they're asking me for is a shortcut. Like, hey, how do you get a lot of people to watch your thing? And it's like, I don't know. I have no idea why people find this stuff. I don't even know. We don't know how to market or promote this stuff. I don't even know. We just put them out. But I think it's what I end up always saying to young filmmakers is like, stop identifying so much as a filmmaker. You're going to become so boring. Just go live an interesting life. If you're going to want to identify as anything, identify as an artist. Go live a wild artist adventure. Change your view on the world. Have an interesting, nuanced, different view on the world, and your art and your films will begin to reflect that. And that's when people will resonate with it. Not if you got it, oh, okay, cool, I've studied all the greats and I know how to structure this and what kind of cameras to use and the lens they used on Florida Man will really help. No, it ain't about that. Live an interesting, wild life, and you'll start to see the world in a different way. And once you start to see the world in a different way, and hopefully from a higher expanded consciousness, you can start to, everything that you do will become a reflection of that. And it's a beautiful thing. And these films are one of many reflections of just the way we're living our life. And it's more connected. And we listen to the mushroom, and when we take the mushroom, it connects us, and it makes me feel more connected to the world and my environment and my fellow brothers and sisters here. So I've changed my lens on the world through psychedelics, through meditation, through exercise, through so many things that I don't even want to get into. But I've changed my view on the world. And I think that's why people resonate with this stuff, is because they see that I'm operating without judgment, and that's a place of liberation. That's, you're not just high at that point, you're free. So that's interesting. That's interesting to watch the work of people who are operating in those realms. So I would say just keep working on yourself, live an interesting adventure. And when you can, and when you feel like that true pull of inspiration, follow it. It's kind of so easy in a way. It's really easy. Like the muse will take form. if you just let it, if you serve the muse, beautiful work will come out of it. And, just honor that stuff. And it's not about a lens. It's not about an editor. It's not about a crew. It's not about your subjects. It's about you and how you're seeing this place and how you're taking it in, and trying to influence and impart that on other people.